Hello friends, I am Sharad Zade, practicing chartered accountant for more than 38 years and also handling disciplinary cases for the last 17-18 years. Today, probably I am going to conclude the second schedule to the Chartered Accountants Act dealing with negligence leading to professional misconduct. We have seen in the last session, the last lecture, the last clause number 10 of Schedule 2 Part 1 as applicable to practicing professional. Now today we are going to see Part 2 of Schedule 2 as applicable to members of the institute generally. It implies that this Part 2 Schedule 2 applies to the professionals in practice as well as who are not in practice. A member of the institute, whether in practice or not, shall be deemed to be guilty of professional misconduct if he, clause 1, contravenes any of the provisions of this act, the regulations made thereunder, or any guidelines issued by the council. So, contravention by a member of the institute of this act means the Chartered Accountants Act. Likewise, for other professions, the Cost and Works Accountants Act as well as the Company Secretaries Act, contravention of any provision of the act of which you are a member of the institute established by respective statutes or regulations made thereunder. Under Chartered Accountants Act as well as under other two statutes, regulations have been made especially with respect to the conduct and investigation of professional negligence and professional misconduct. So regulations have been framed in 2007. So those regulations or such other regulations. And third, any guidelines issued by the institute. The Institute of Chartered Accountants of India has come out with a guideline known as Council General Guidelines 2008. Under these guidelines, various conditions, various restrictions have been put on the part of chartered accountant, whether in practice or not. We are going to see these guidelines in detail in 2-3 lectures after the conclusion of second schedule to the Chartered Accountants Act. Now these guidelines, just to give an idea, to instance, these guidelines have put a restrictions on the number of tax audits to be done by a professional chartered accountant, or how to compute that number 60, or it has put restrictions on the number of audits of the companies to be performed by a chartered accountant. Although in case of Companies Act 2013 there is no ceiling whatsoever applicable to private limited companies, but the ceiling has put by the Council General Guidelines and which is mandatory on the part of a member to follow. So this we are going to see in detail after this second schedule is over. Then clause 2, which says that a professional guilty of professional misconduct if he, being an employee of any company, firm, person, discloses confidential information acquired in the course of employment except as and when required by any law for the time being in force or except as permitted by the employer. So a professional, whether in employment or in practice, obviously is in the privy to various confidential information of his clientele or the information about his employer. That information must be kept utmost confidential and it is not to be divulged. It is not to be given to others. Leave aside the competitors. It is not to be given away at all. If it is found, then the concerned member is deemed to be guilty of professional misconduct. Of course, exception is unless it is permitted by law or it is in accordance with law for the time being in force. That means an employee chartered accountant, whether in practice or not, that means he is an employee with a firm of chartered accountants or employed with an industry, is questioned in a court of law and he has to disclose the information under oath where he states that he will tell the truth and nothing but truth, then in that cases he has to give whatever information which he has. This confidentiality clause will not be applicable in such situations, or to give the information when so permitted by the employer. Now, for instance, an employee chartered accountant of a company attends before the income tax authorities and the officer calls for certain information or asks for certain explanation about the accounts, then the concerned employee is required to give such information. Then, with the permission of the employer, that means on the basis of the power of attorney or on the basis of later, whatever the case may be, letter of authority, concerned member can give information under law if so required by a court, or with the permission of employer he can part with such information. Then clause 3 deals with to be guilty of professional misconduct if he includes in any information, statement, return or form to be submitted to the institute, council or any of its committees, director discipline, board of discipline, disciplinary committee, quality review board or the appellate authority, any particulars knowing them to be false. Now, as a member, we are required to give information to the institute or board of discipline, disciplinary committee or appellate authority or quality review board, etc. In that cases, if we give the information knowingly which is false, it will be a professional misconduct. Now, for instance, for the empanelment under bank audit, we have to fill up every year MEF form, and in that MEF form we give information every year. Now, that information, if we give knowingly which is false, it will be a professional misconduct. And the last clause is a member is deemed to be guilty of professional misconduct if he defalcates or embezzles money received in his professional capacity. The professional is in receipt of funds from his clients, maybe for the payment of advance tax, maybe for the payment of self-assessment tax, or maybe for the payment of ROC fees or any other fees which are required to be incurred by our client and for which the client has given such money in advance to us, to the professionals. And if that money is embezzled or misappropriated or defalcated, and that means it has been spent on the issues or on the purposes for which it is not so authorized by your client giving the advance, it is a professional misconduct on the part of a member of the institute. Now, these are the only 4 clauses as applicable to both the persons in both the members in practice or not in practice. That covers the Schedule 2 Part 2. Now, we have got Part 3 applicable to other misconduct in relation to members of the institute generally. So again, by the same logic, this Part 3 has got only one clause, applies to members whether in practice or not. Now what the clause 3 says, a member of the institute whether in practice or not shall be deemed to be guilty of other misconduct if he is held guilty by any civil or criminal court for an offence which is punishable with imprisonment for a term exceeding 6 months. In Schedule 1, it is below 6 months. In Schedule 2, it is exceeding 6 months. So, if any offence is committed by a member of the institute, whether in practice or not, and that offence may be a civil offence or a criminal offence, which leads to imprisonment for more than 6 months. Generally, as I understand, for a criminal offence, there may be a rigorous imprisonment, and for a civil offence, there may be a normal imprisonment. In that cases, if the period exceeds 6 months, then such member is liable for professional misconduct to be considered by the institute on the ground of unbecoming of a professional because he is guilty for civil or criminal law by a competent court. Now, here the word is punishable with imprisonment. In a sense, simply because an offense is committed will not lead to misconduct, in my opinion. That offense must be culminated into a court order awarding imprisonment for 6 months or 9 months or a year or 2 years, whatever the case may be, whatever the duration, and only thereafter a member can be held guilty under this clause. Again, it is my submission that if a district court has held a member guilty and he has been awarded 1 year imprisonment, but if the concerned member has appealed against the district court with the High Court or against the High Court judgment with the Supreme Court, that means till he has exhausted all his legal recourses available to him, the institute should not take cognizance simply on the basis of lower court awarding a punishment of imprisonment for more than 6 months. So these are the two schedules to the Chartered Accountants Act, Cost and Works Accountants Act, as well as under the Company Secretaries Act. Except in a Chartered Accountants Act, in Schedule 1, Part 1, there is one additional clause, whereas all other clauses in Schedule 1 and Schedule 2. Schedule 1 has got 4 parts, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, Part 4, and Schedule 2 also has got 3 parts, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, are identical with the Cost and Works Accountants Act and the Company Secretaries Act. So interpretation or understanding of the law as respect to the Chartered Accountants Act, in my opinion, can be used, can be applied for the interpretation or understanding of the provisions of Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 to the Cost and Works Accountants Act as well as for the Company Secretaries Act. Now today, I think it is 28th lecture. I am concluding the professional misconduct issues. In the remaining 2 or 3 lectures, I will try to cover the General Council guidelines which are mandatory on the part of Chartered Accountants, because it has put certain restrictions, especially as to the number of tax audits to be conducted, number of company audits to be conducted, the professional statutory audit fees should not be more than other fees chargeable by the firm or its sister concern, and so on and so forth. All these conditions are included in General Council General Guidelines 2008 issued under Clause 1 Part 2 of Schedule 2 to the Chartered Accountants Act. So in the next session, from next 2 or 3 lectures, I do not know how many lectures will be required, but I think I should be able to complete them within 2-3 lectures. Those guidelines we will see in detail. If you like this video, please forward it to your friends who are professionals. Ask them to subscribe and as well as like it, so that more the views, the persons visiting for the first time will feel that it has been viewed by many professionals, so it should be heard in his interest. If the views are not that a person expects, if the views are in 1 or 2 or 3 digits, then probably he may feel that it is not worth listening, and the efforts which I had put in communicating these lectures may be lost. Thank you very much for patient listening to these 28 lectures. Again, I reiterate that just tap that particular link. Do not simply raise your thumbs, because that doesn't mean that you have viewed it, or it will mean that nobody has viewed it for an outsider who is really interested. Thank you very much. I am stopping for the day.